Some would have you believe that reel mowers cut grass like a scythe, and that the only purpose of the bed knife is to position the grass for cutting. They use this calculation to prove it. However, when doing an engineering proof, you must use the same units on both sides of the equation, which doesn't happen here. They come up with 844,570 inches per minute, a very large number. Inches per minute is not a standard engineering unit for speed. It should either be feet per second or miles per hour. To convert to feet per second, we divide by 60 seconds per minute and 12 inches per foot and come up with 1,173 feet per second. The speed of sound is 1,100 feet per second. In the 1950s, the U.S. Air Force flight tested a jet engine powered, propeller-driven fighter called the XF-84H. They wanted the propeller for efficiency, but it also had to be supersonic. Because the propeller was supersonic, the thunder screech proved so loud that it actually made people ill. So I don't think anybody's going to be mowing greens at 6 in the morning with a supersonic walk-behind. Here, in a more recent publication, they've increased the speed to 1.2 million, without any supporting calculations. The actual calculation is much simpler. If we take the circumference of the reel of 25 inches and multiply it by 840 revolutions per minute, then use the same conversion factors, we see that the speed is actually 28 feet per second. Reel speed is not that important for the actual cutting. On a properly maintained reel, you can probably cut grass just by pulling the reel across the bed knife, just like you cut paper. Reel speed is important because it controls the clip rate, or the distance between cuts. Here they try to reinforce the idea that the reel is a scythe, but then they talk about the importance of a sharp bed knife. If the reel is doing all of the cutting as it would if it were a scythe, then we should never have to grind the bed knife. So which is doing the cutting, the reel or the bed knife? To clarify, let's look at some definitions. A scythe is a blade. This sounds more like a rotary mower. A shear is two-bladed, worked by the crossing of cutting edges. I think that better describes what a reel is. They often use the word scissor instead of shear. Those are typically thought of as specialized shears for cutting cloth or paper by the crossing of contacting blades. You can shear without having contact between the two blades. Let me repeat that. You can shear without having contact between the two blades. Anyone who has worked in a sheet metal shop knows that when you set a shear up to cut sheet metal, you will vary the gap between the blades depending on the thickness and material of the sheet metal. This is no different in mowing. Some turf in some conditions will cut fine if you have no contact between the reel and the bed knife, and others will require slight contact to cut properly. You don't want to limit yourself to one theory of grinding, or you may find yourself unable to properly maintain your course. I think it is obvious that both blades are doing the cutting, which is the reason that you must sharpen both the reel and the bed knife. If you can't do something very well, it must be bad. Here we see their theory on relief grinding. To be fair, they have to say that the advantage is that relief grinding reduces stress when you have contact. In a John Deere study, which compares horsepower required to reel and bed knife setup, we see that on reels with no contact, adding relief reduces the power required by 15%. So relief reduces the stress whether or not you have contact, and in fact, if we look again, we see that relief with contact is the same as no relief and no contact. Toro is also very specific. They say, it is important to understand that Toro reels are designed and manufactured to optimize available power from the engine and hydraulic systems. To help do this, we put a relief on every reel blade to reduce the width of the reel blade that contacts the bed knife. This has been proven to reduce power requirements as well as allow the machine to operate more efficiently. This can be very important depending on the terrain, type of grass, and amount of grass being cut. Notice that they say can be very important, which means it's not always necessary. Jacobsen is now producing all of its reels with 45 degrees of relief, compared to 20 degrees they used to put on 11-bladed reels. This can make the relief last up to 40 spin touch-up grinds. They did this to reduce the quality of cut issues for customers with spin-only grinders, at least through the warranty period. Here we see that it is apparently futile to grind relief, as backlapping will remove it anyway. Let me ask a couple of questions. True or false? If you backlap, you need to relief grind. The answer is true. Backlapping is much less effective on reels without relief. Next question, true or false? If you relief grind, you need to backlap. The answer is false. Grinding relief does not mean you have to backlap. Here they talk about using a grinder that requires you to backlap. They imply that means any grinder except theirs. The fact is that any spin grinder in good working condition will grind straight enough so that you would not need to backlap. The only grinder that requires you to backlap is a manual single-blade relief grinder. Ironically, they are the only major manufacturer to still make one. Whether or not you need to relief grind is determined by the type of turf you have and your mowing conditions, all things that can change. Now this one just baffles me. The question is, why do all mower manufacturers specify relief? They say it is because of all the people using antiquated grinding equipment. If that were true, then why don't the manufacturers specify that you don't need relief if you use modern grinding equipment, and that you only need relief if you use antiquated grinding equipment? The mower manufacturers don't say this because they all have studies which show that their mowers will work better if they have relief. In some cases, the difference isn't perceptible. In others, however, they just won't work without it. Since they are telling you that you do not need to add single blade relief when you use their grinder, there must be something special about that grinder. Here in some older literature, they explain that they get automatic relief grinding while they are spin grinding. It is the calculated relationship between the reel rotation speed and the traverse speed which creates the hollow grind. Today they make their grinders with variable spin and traverse speeds, so that can't be the real reason. In fact, when we tested it with our grinders, we got the same relief as they got no matter what speed we ran the spin motor or the carriage travel. Here is what they want you to believe about what their spin grinder can do compared to anything else on the market. Theirs is the only one that can produce this hollow grind. Here we see what they say, and here we see the result from tests. That is not a hollow grind. It's not even a flat grind. Testing shows that you will get between 5 and 10 thousandths variation on the diameter from the front to the back of the blade, depending on the width of the blade and how hard you infeed the grinding wheel. What is actually happening is as the reel blade comes in contact with the grinding wheel, the back of the blade hits first and hardest. As the blade moves across the grinding wheel, there is more surface contact, so less material is ground off, and the blade is pushed away from the grinding wheel. As the blade moves past the grinding wheel, it either maintains its distance or starts to move back towards the grinding wheel. Once the blade is completely off the grinding wheel, it returns to its initial position. All the movement that creates the 5 to 10 thousandths relief comes from the reel and has little to do with the grinder. One final point. The photo on the left is what you get with their grinder. The photo on the right is what you're supposed to be getting with everybody else's grinder. However, the photo on the right is actually from a lapped reel. Again, any properly maintained spin grinder will grind straight enough so that no backlapping is required. There's nothing mythical about reel grinders.